In the far reaches of space, humanity had often found itself alone. While other civilizations thrived, humanity's existence was often brushed aside or misunderstood. Every time they ventured out into the galaxy, they faced rejection. Humans had tried to join galactic councils, trade routes, and alliances, but time and time again, they were dismissed. Many believed that humanity was too young, too unpredictable, or simply too different. But humans never gave up. They were resilient. They kept searching, kept exploring. Then, one day, they found something no one expected. It was a small, forgotten planet on the edge of a distant galaxy. From the outside, it seemed like any other lifeless rock, dull, barren, and untouched. But as human scouts began their exploration, they noticed strange readings. Life signs, faint but real. This planet was home to an alien race, one humanity had never encountered before. The planet's surface was scared, and there were signs of once thriving cities now in ruins. The buildings had collapsed under the weight of time, and the air was thick with the remnants of what had once been a flourishing civilization. The alien race that lived there was called the HFY. They were unlike any species the humans had ever encountered. Tall, with smooth, silver-blue skin, long flowing hair, and eyes that shone with an ethereal light. They were a peaceful people, but their once great empire had crumbled centuries ago. The HFY had been abandoned by every other civilization that had once helped them rise to greatness. They were cast aside when they could no longer offer value. The HFY had learned, through harsh experience, that the galaxy was cold and uncaring. For the HFY, the humans' arrival was nothing short of a miracle. At first, they watched the humans from a distance, unsure of their intentions. They were used to being alone, forgotten by all others. But the humans were different. They didn't seem to care that the HFY had no wealth, no advanced technology, and no standing in the galaxy. They didn't care that the planet was near the edge of extinction. Instead, the humans offered something that had been absent for so long: a chance to rebuild, to heal, and to grow. The humans didn't ask for anything in return. They didn't seek riches or power. They didn't expect the HFY to join any galactic councils or trade alliances. All they asked for was the chance to help. They offered food, medical supplies, technology, and knowledge. Everything they could to help the HFY survive. It was a gesture of pure kindness, something that HFY had never experienced from any other race. As the humans continued to explore the planet, they made a startling discovery. The HFY were not the only survivors. There were other species who had been abandoned here, scattered across the ruins of the HFY's once thriving cities. These species, too, had been discarded, left to fend for themselves in a hostile world. Some were weak, others were injured, but they all shared one thing in common. They were survivors. And now, they too had found a protector in humanity. The humans made their decision quickly. They couldn't leave these people behind, not when they had the resources and knowledge to help. They contacted their leaders, and soon, a full-scale mission was launched to provide aid to the HFY and the other species living on the planet. The first human ships arrived, bringing with them medical teams, engineers, and scientists. They began working tirelessly to repair the broken infrastructure, heal the sick, and provide food and shelter for the survivors. Despite the initial resistance from some HFY, who had become distrustful of all outsiders, the humans persisted. They didn't force anything upon the HFY. They simply showed up, did the work, and offered friendship. Slowly but surely, the HFY began to trust them. The walls they had built around their hearts started to crumble, and they began to see that not all civilizations were out to exploit or abandon them. For the humans, this mission was not about conquering or gaining power. It was about making the universe a better place. They had been rejected by every other civilization, but that didn't stop them from offering kindness to those in need. The humans knew that true strength lay not in power or technology, but in their ability to lift others up. The first steps had been taken, but the road ahead would be long and filled with challenges. The Excel theory had been abandoned for so long, and rebuilding their trust would not happen overnight. But humanity had made a promise to protect and help, no matter the cost. The universe may have turned its back on the Excel theory, but humanity had made its choice, and for the first time in a long while, hope flickered on the horizon for this abandoned alien race. The humans had arrived to give them a future. The Excel theory stood in the shadow of their ancient city, their once proud civilization reduced to ruins. The skies above, once filled with bustling ships and vibrant life, were now quiet and still. Humanity's arrival had brought something that the Excel theory had not experienced in centuries: hope. But hope was a fragile thing, and many of the Excel theory still struggled to believe that this was real. It wasn't easy for the humans. When they first landed, there had been hesitation, even fear, in the eyes of the Excel theory. The humans weren't like the other species who had come and gone. The Excel theory had seen too many false promises and empty gestures in the past. They had been abandoned by so many. Why should they trust the humans now? But the humans understood their reluctance. They didn't come with grand speeches or demands. Instead, they offered something simple, something that had been long forgotten by the Excel theory: a promise. A promise to protect, to help, and to never abandon them. This wasn't about power or control. It was about a commitment to a future where the Excel theory could stand strong once more. Captain Jace Reynolds, the leader of the human team, had seen the pain in their eyes. He knew that Excel theory had been betrayed before, and it wouldn't be easy to gain their trust. But he also knew that the humans had something that could make a difference: determination. Where others had given up, humans had always found a way. And if they could help rebuild this broken civilization, they would. The first step was to show that Excel theory that the humans weren't here to conquer or to exploit them. They were here to help. Reynolds and his team spent weeks working alongside the Excel theory, not as masters, but as partners. They shared knowledge, skills, and resources. The humans brought advanced technology to repair the damaged cities and to provide food and medical supplies. They showed the Excel theory how to grow crops in the fertile soil that had been abandoned for so long. But more than that, the humans listened. They listened to the stories of the Excel theory, their rise, their fall, and the long years of loneliness. The humans didn't try to change the Excel theory. They simply offered a helping hand, ready to support them in whatever way was needed. There was one Excel theory elder, a wise and strong leader named Kaler, who had lived through the darkest times. Kaler had seen the empire crumble, watched as friends and family had perished or disappeared. She had seen civilizations turn their backs on her people. She was not quick to trust, and she wasn't easily swayed by promises. But something about the humans intrigued her. They were different. They weren't like the other species that had come and gone. There was sincerity in their actions, and Kaler couldn't ignore that. One evening, as the sun set over the ruins of their city, Kaler approached Captain Reynolds. She had spent days observing the humans, watching how they worked tirelessly to help her people. Finally, she spoke. "Why?" Kaler's voice was calm but filled with years of pain. "Why are you doing this? You have nothing to gain. The galaxy is full of stronger races, wealthier planets. Why help us?" Reynolds stood tall, his expression unwavering. "Because it's the right thing to do," he replied simply. "We've been rejected too. We know what it feels like to be looked down upon. But we believe everyone deserves a chance, and we believe in the Excel theory. You have the strength to rise again. All you need is someone who believes in you." Kaler was silent for a moment, contemplating his words. She had heard promises before, empty ones that had led to disappointment. But there was something different in his eyes, something she hadn't seen in a long time: genuine compassion. The promise of protection was not just words. It was a pledge, a bond that would tie the fates of humanity and the Excel theory together. The humans had no ulterior motives. They weren't asking for resources, land, or power. They simply wanted to help the Scifi rebuild, to give them a future. And slowly, the Scifi began to accept it. There were still moments of doubt, of hesitation. Some Scifi were afraid of trusting again, afraid that they would be left alone once more. But with every passing day, the humans proved that their commitment was real. They worked side by side with the Scifi, helping them rebuild their homes, their cities, and their lives. As the weeks turned into months, a new sense of purpose began to take root among the Scifi. They started to believe in the possibility of a future, not just for themselves, but for their children. They began to see that, with humanity's help, they could once again become a thriving race. It wasn't easy, and the road ahead would still be difficult. But for the first time in many years, the Scifi allowed themselves to dream again. The humans had made a promise, and they were keeping it. No matter what the galaxy thought, no matter the cost, humanity had chosen to protect the Scifi. And in doing so, they had given them the most valuable gift of all: hope. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Humanity's presence on the planet had become a symbol of hope for the Scifi. Slowly, they began to rebuild what had been broken. But the task was immense. Whole cities lay in ruin, their once proud structures crumbling under the weight of time. The land had been scarred by centuries of neglect. But in this darkness, a spark of light began to grow. Captain Reynolds and his team continued to work side by side with the Scifi. They didn't just bring technology and resources. They brought something far more important: patience and understanding. They didn't rush the Scifi. They didn't try to push them into rebuilding too quickly. Instead, they took their time, offering support without expectation, showing the Scifi that they didn't have to do everything on their own anymore. For the Scifi, this was a new way of thinking. They had grown used to being left behind, forgotten by every civilization that once sought to use them. They had been abandoned in their time of need, their cries for help ignored by those who once called them allies. So when the humans came, the Scifi were unsure. They were cautious, fearful that this too would be another fleeting promise, like so many before. But the humans were different. They didn't expect anything in return. They didn't come with weapons or demands. They came with a simple message: we believe in you. And over time, that message began to take root in the hearts of the Scifi. One of the most powerful moments in the rebuilding process came when the humans helped repair the great library of the Scifi. The library had once been the heart of their civilization, a place of knowledge and culture. But it had fallen into ruin, its vast archives of history and wisdom buried under the rubble. The Scifi believed it would never be restored. Yet, when Captain Reynolds and his team arrived with their technology, they made it their mission to restore it. The Scifi watched in awe as the humans worked tirelessly, using their advanced equipment to clear away the debris, repair the walls, and restore the ancient manuscripts. Day by day, the library began to take shape again. The Scifi elder, Kaler, watched this process unfold, her heart filled with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. It was a powerful moment, a sign that the humans were not just helping them survive, but helping them thrive again. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Kaler visited the site of the library. She found Captain Reynolds standing before the restored entrance, looking out over the land. She walked up to him, her steps slow but determined. "You've done more than rebuild a library," Kaler said quietly. "You've brought us back to life." Reynolds turned to face her, his expression calm but sincere. "No, Kaler, you've done this. We're just here to help you find your way again." Kaler studied him for a long moment, her eyes filled with the weight of centuries. "I was wrong to doubt you," she said softly. "I thought no one would ever care about us again. But you've proven that there are still those who will stand by us." For the first time, Kaler allowed herself to believe in that promise. It wasn't just the humans helping them rebuild their cities or their libraries. It was the promise that they would never be abandoned again. The XL Theory were not alone. They had found a friend in humanity, and that bond was growing stronger with each passing day. As the days passed, more and more XL Theory began to join the effort. They worked with the humans, side by side, rebuilding their homes, restoring their cities, and reclaiming the land that had once been lost. Slowly, a new sense of community began to form. The XL Theory learned from the humans, not just about technology, but about resilience and hope. They saw that despite their past, despite all they had lost, there was still a future to fight for. But it wasn't just the physical rebuilding that mattered. The XL Theory also needed to heal emotionally and spiritually. For centuries, they had been told they were worthless, that their contributions didn't matter. Many of them had lost hope, unable to see a way forward. But now, with the humans by their side, they began to understand that their worth wasn't tied to what they had lost. It was in who they were, and in the future they could create together. As the weeks stretched into months, the XL Theory started to rebuild not only their cities, but also their sense of identity. They began to take pride in who they were once again. And the humans, ever patient, ever understanding, stood beside them every step of the way. They didn't push the XL Theory to rush through their healing process. They simply allowed the XL Theory to find their own pace, to rebuild their strength and confidence in their own time. Captain Reynolds stood with Kaler one evening as they looked over the work that had been done. The city was beginning to come back to life. Streets were being paved, homes were being rebuilt, and children once again played in the fields. "This is just the beginning," Reynolds said, his voice filled with quiet pride. Kaler nodded. "Yes, it is." The XL Theory had taken the first steps toward rebuilding their civilization, and with the humans by their side, they knew they weren't alone anymore. There was hope, there was a future, and they would build it together. The XL Theory were no longer just rebuilding, they were thriving. The once abandoned cities were coming back to life. The land that had been forgotten was now teeming with growth, and most importantly, the XL Theory were beginning to believe in themselves once again. What had started as a fragile promise between the humans and the XL Theory had blossomed into a strong partnership, one that was rooted in trust, mutual respect, and shared determination. Captain Reynolds watched as his team worked alongside the XL Theory, restoring the great library to its former glory, improving the agricultural systems, and setting up medical facilities. The human technology was powerful, but it was the heart behind the effort that made the difference. Reynolds had seen the XL Theory struggle, their faces filled with doubt. But now he saw something different. Hope, a light in their eyes that hadn't been there before. The XL Theory weren't the only ones changed. The humans, too, had learned from the XL Theory. They had seen the resilience of a species that had been through so much, and yet, here they were, standing tall and working together with a shared vision for the future. The humans had offered their knowledge and their technology, but in return, they had received something priceless, the strength of a people who refused to give up. One day, as the humans and XL Theory worked together in the fields, Kaler, the wise elder, approached Captain Reynolds. Her face, which had once been clouded with suspicion and doubt, now held a quiet sense of pride. "You have done more for us than we could have ever imagined," Kaler said softly, her voice filled with both gratitude and wonder. "In such a short time, we have seen our cities rise again. We have seen our people regain what we thought was lost forever. You have given us more than just technology and resources. You have given us hope." Reynolds smiled, though his eyes were filled with the weight of the journey. "It's not just me, Kaler. It's all of us. The humans and the XL Theory. We've worked together to rebuild. And together, we will keep moving forward." Kaler nodded, a deep understanding passing between them. They were no longer two separate species. They had become partners, united in purpose. And that unity was their greatest strength. The next day, a celebration was held in the heart of the city. The newly restored Great Library was open to the public, and the XL Theory gathered together, their spirits lifted by the progress they had made. Humans and cell theory mingled, sharing stories and laughter. It wasn't just a celebration of physical achievements. It was a celebration of the bond that had been formed, a bond that would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. As the day turned to night, the air was filled with the sound of music and laughter. Reynolds stood beside Kaylor, looking out over the crowd. The city was alive again, filled with the sounds of people working together, building something new and beautiful. Kaylor looked at Reynolds, a soft smile on her face. "I never thought I would see this day. I never thought I would see my people smiling again, not after everything we've been through. But here we are." Reynolds placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's not just about what we've rebuilt, Kaylor. It's about what we've done together. We've shown that even after everything you've been through, you're still strong. And that's something no one can take away." The evening continued, but as the stars began to twinkle above, Kaylor took a moment to step away from the festivities. She walked to the edge of the city, looking out over the vast landscape. For so long, she had been consumed by the past, the loss of their empire, the betrayal of the civilizations that had once called the cell theory their allies. But now, as she stood on the edge of their rebuilt city, she felt something different, a sense of peace. The humans had kept their promise. They had stood by the cell theory when no one else would. And in return, the cell theory had found strength in their unity, both with the humans and with each other. The future no longer seemed uncertain. It seemed bright, filled with endless possibilities. In the days that followed, the cell theory continued to grow stronger. They built new homes, established schools to pass on their knowledge, and created alliances with neighboring civilizations who had once viewed them as weak and forgotten. Slowly but surely, the cell theory began to re-establish their place in the galaxy. But no matter how far they went, they never forgot the humans. They never forgot the people who had seen their potential when others had turned away. And as the years passed, the bond between the humans and the cell theory only grew stronger. The humans had done more than help rebuild a civilization. They had shown the cell theory that even in the darkest of times, there was always a way forward. And together, they had proven that unity, across species, across cultures, was the most powerful force in the galaxy. As Captain Reynolds looked out over the horizon, he knew that this was just the beginning. The cell theory had found their place in the stars again, and humanity would be there to help them along the way. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, because they knew that as long as they stood together, nothing could break them apart. Months passed, and the partnership between humans and cell theory grew even stronger. The once abandoned planet was no longer a place of despair, but a thriving world filled with hope and progress. Captain Reynolds and his team had witnessed the cell theory's incredible transformation, from a broken people to a civilization on the rise. The bond between the two species was unshakable, and each day they worked together toward a brighter future. The humans had made their home on the planet, working hand in hand with the cell theory. And in turn, the cell theory had begun to share their culture and history. Captain Reynolds had learned much about their people, about the cell theory's deep respect for nature, their wisdom, and the strength that had allowed them to survive despite centuries of hardship. But there were still challenges ahead. Though the cell theory had made great strides in rebuilding their cities and their way of life, their future was still uncertain. There were remnants of old wounds, scars left by years of abandonment and betrayal. Some cell theory still struggled to trust, not just the humans, but each other. The memory of their lost empire, the betrayal of their former allies, weighed heavily on many of their hearts. One day, Kaylor, the wise elder of the cell theory, approached Captain Reynolds with a request. She had been working with the other leaders of the cell theory, trying to unite the different factions that had once been divided. Some of the older generations still held on to the bitterness of the past, unwilling to forgive the civilizations that had abandoned them. Others were more open to the idea of cooperation with humanity. The challenge now was to bridge the gap between these two groups and show them the strength that could be found in unity. "Captain," Kaler began, her voice steady but filled with concern, "there are still divisions among our people. While we have made great progress, some of the older factions refuse to accept that we can trust others, even the humans. They believe that we must stay isolated, protect our own, and never rely on outsiders again." Reynolds looked at her, understanding the weight of her words. "I see. It's not easy to let go of the past, especially after all that you've been through." Kaler nodded. "No, it is not. But I believe that if we do not unite, we will never move forward. Our people are strong, Captain, but divided. If we cannot come together, we risk losing everything we have worked so hard to build." Reynolds paused, thinking carefully. He had seen the resilience of the Excel theory, but he also understood that healing would take time. "I will help you, Kaler. We will help you bring your people together. It may take time, but together we can show them that the future lies in unity, not isolation." Kaler's eyes softened with gratitude. "Thank you, Captain. I believe this is the key to our future." In the days that followed, Reynolds and Kaler worked together to organize a gathering, a meeting of all the factions of the Excel theory. The idea was simple: bring everyone together and show them the strength of the unity they had formed with the humans. They would share their progress, their hopes, and their vision for the future. The gathering took place in the heart of the city, where the restored Great Library stood proudly, symbolizing the rebirth of the Excel theory. Leaders from all factions gathered, each carrying with them their own doubts and fears. Some looked at the humans with suspicion, unsure of their true intentions. Others, however, were more hopeful, recognizing the contributions the humans had made to their rebuilding efforts. Kaler spoke first, her voice calm and commanding. "My people, for centuries we have been alone. We have suffered, we have struggled, and we have been abandoned by those we once called allies. But now we stand at the threshold of something greater. Together with the humans, we have rebuilt our cities, our lives, and our hope. But if we are to move forward, we must unite. We must learn to trust again, not just in ourselves, but in each other." Captain Reynolds stepped forward, his voice clear and sincere. "We, the humans, are not here to take what is yours. We are here to help. We believe in the strength of the Excel theory, and we believe that together we can build a future that is stronger than anything we could achieve alone. We will stand by your side, as friends, as partners, and as allies." For a long moment, the room was silent. The Excel theory leaders exchanged glances, each one weighing the words they had just heard. It was a difficult decision. Trust didn't come easily, especially after centuries of betrayal. But slowly, something changed. The walls that had been built between the factions began to crack. Leaders who had once held onto their anger began to soften, and those who had been more open to cooperation nodded in agreement. Finally, one of the oldest leaders, a gray-haired Excel theory named Thurkor, stood. His voice was raspy, but his words carried weight. Perhaps it is time to move forward," he said, his gaze turning to Captain Reynolds. "We have been alone for too long. We have learned that isolation will not protect us. It is time to open our hearts to others, to rebuild not just our cities, but our trust." The room was still, but there was a sense of quiet agreement. One by one, the other leaders stood, their voices joining in a unified call for peace and cooperation. It was not an easy decision, but it was a necessary one. The Excel theory had taken the first step toward healing, toward building a future where they were no longer alone. As the meeting ended and the leaders began to disperse, Kaler approached Captain Reynolds once more. "Thank you, Captain," she said softly. "You've shown us that we are not weak, and that unity is our greatest strength." Reynolds smiled, his heart filled with pride. "No, Kaler, the strength has always been within you. You just needed to see it." The Excel theory had taken a crucial step toward their future, and with humanity's help, they were no longer walking that path alone. The days that followed the unification meeting were filled with a quiet but noticeable change. The once divided factions of the Scifi had started to work together, sharing their resources and knowledge with each other. The wounds of the past were not forgotten, but the people were beginning to heal, and they realized that their future depended on their unity. Captain Reynolds and his team had remained on the planet to help guide the process. They didn't force themselves into leadership roles, but instead offered their support whenever it was needed. They had come to understand the Scifi, their ways, and their struggles. More than that, they had come to care for them as they did for their own people. One day, as Reynolds was walking through the bustling streets of the newly revived capital city, he saw Kaler speaking with a group of Scifi leaders. Her voice was calm, but there was an undeniable fire in her eyes. She was addressing the issues that still lingered among their people: the lack of trust, the lingering fear of the outside world. But she was also speaking of hope, of a shared future. Kaler noticed Reynolds approaching and gave him a warm smile. "Captain," she greeted him. "I was just telling them how much progress we've made. It's not perfect, but we're on the right track." Reynolds nodded. "I can see that. You've done incredible work, Kaler." "I've had help," she said, glancing at her fellow leaders. "But it is the humans who've shown us what true partnership looks like. Together, we can do things we never thought possible." The conversation shifted to the challenges that lay ahead. Though unity was beginning to take root, the Scifi still had many obstacles to overcome. Their planet was healing, but the damage done over the centuries of neglect was not easy to undo. Their resources were limited, and many areas of the planet had been left in ruins, untouched for generations. "We need more resources," one of the younger Scifi leaders, Isha, said. "The land is recovering, but it's still fragile. We can't continue to rely on outside help forever." Reynolds understood the concern. "You're right," he said, "but the humans are committed to helping you rebuild. We have the technology and the expertise to help restore your planet. We can also help you with sustainable farming, clean energy, and rebuilding your infrastructure." Aisha was silent for a moment, considering his words. "But how do we ensure that we don't fall back into isolation? That we don't turn away from the outside world again?" It was a valid concern. The fear of being abandoned was deeply ingrained in the Scifi's culture. They had been betrayed by other civilizations in the past, and now, even though they were beginning to trust humans, they feared that history might repeat itself. Kaler stepped forward, her voice calm but filled with determination. "We must build alliances, not just with the humans but with other civilizations. We need to prove that we are not a people to be forgotten. We must be a part of the larger community of worlds." Reynolds couldn't agree more. "That's exactly why we're here," he said. "The humans are committed to helping you forge those alliances. We've already started speaking with other species who could assist you in your efforts. Together, we can help you regain your place in the galactic community." As the days turned into weeks, the Scifi made slow but steady progress. They began to rebuild their cities, restoring the great libraries and temples that had once been symbols of their culture. Their scientists worked side by side with human engineers to develop new technologies that would help their planet thrive without exploiting its fragile resources. But not everyone was as optimistic as Kaler and Reynolds. Some of the older factions remained skeptical of their new alliances. They feared that working too closely with the humans, or any other civilization, would make them vulnerable again. They clung to their old ways, hesitant to embrace the changes that were sweeping through their society. One evening, Kaler and Reynolds sat in the great library, discussing their next steps. The library, once a place of solitude and silence, was now a bustling center of knowledge and collaboration. Scifi and humans worked side by side, exchanging ideas and learning from one another. Kaler sighed, looking out at the vibrant city beyond the library's tall windows. "There are still so many who are afraid," she said softly. "They don't see what I see. They don't see the promise of what we're building together." Reynolds placed a hand on her shoulder. "You can't change everything overnight, but you've done more than anyone could have imagined." and with time, others will see the truth in what you're doing. Kaler smiled, grateful for his support. I hope you're right, Captain. I hope that in the end, we can be a part of something greater. Not just for the Exaltheri, but for all of us. The future was uncertain, and there would still be struggles ahead. But Kaler and Reynolds knew one thing for sure. They had come too far to turn back. The Exaltheri had a future now, and it was one they were building together with humanity. It was a future where trust, cooperation, and unity could overcome even the darkest of pasts. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the two of them shared a moment of quiet understanding. The road ahead would be long, but it was a road they would walk together. The sun had barely risen over the horizon, casting a soft golden glow across the now thriving Exaltheri capital. The once damaged city stood tall, its towering structures glimmering in the light, a testament to the hard work and determination that had brought them this far. From the bustling streets to the quiet corners where Exaltheri and human workers collaborated, there was a sense of hope in the air, something that had been missing for far too long. Captain Reynolds walked alongside Kaler, his steps in sync with hers as they made their way through the city's central square. It had been months since the first human team arrived to help the Exaltheri. In that time, not only had they helped rebuild their planet, but they had also helped to heal a broken people. Do you think we've done enough? Kaler asked, her voice soft but filled with a quiet resolve. She had spent so many years leading the efforts to unite her people, but there were still doubts lingering in her mind. Reynolds glanced at her, his face thoughtful. We've done everything we can, Kaler. The rest is up to the Exaltheri. But I believe in them. Kaler nodded, but there was a flicker of worry in her eyes. I worry. It's hard to shake the fear that one day, everything we've worked for could slip away. That we might be left alone again. Reynolds stopped walking for a moment, turning to face her. I understand your fear, he said, but look around you. This city, these people, this is a new beginning. You've built something strong. You've brought your people together. And we, the humans, will always be here to support you, not just as allies, but as friends. Kaler's heart swelled with gratitude. She had never imagined that her people could come so far, that they could rise from the ashes of their past and find a path forward. And now, with humans by their side, the Exaltheri had a chance at a future they had never dared to dream of. As they continued walking, they came upon a group of young Exaltheri children. They were laughing and playing in the square, their faces filled with innocence and joy. They were the future of the Exaltheri, a generation that would grow up knowing peace and unity. One of the children, a young girl with bright green eyes, ran up to Kaler and tugged at her sleeve. Kaler, the girl called excitedly. I want to be like you when I grow up. I want to help our people, just like you do. Kaler smiled down at the girl, her heart swelling with pride. You can be anything you want, little one. You just have to believe in yourself. Reynolds chuckled softly, watching the exchange. You've already inspired them, he said. That's the first step. You've shown them that anything is possible. Kaler looked at the girl, and for a moment, she felt a sense of peace. The future of the Exaltheri was no longer in the hands of the past. It was in the hands of the children, the next generation that would carry forward the lessons of unity, trust, and cooperation. As the day wore on, Reynolds and Kaler visited various parts of the city, checking in on the progress that had been made. The once worn roads were now filled with bustling markets, the streets lined with shops where Exaltheri and humans traded goods, ideas, and stories. It was a beautiful sight, a sight that showed the promise of a new era for both their people. That evening, as the two of them stood together on a balcony overlooking the city, Kaler spoke again, this time with a sense of finality. You were right, Captain. We've come far. And now, it's time for us to stand on our own. Reynolds nodded, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. You've earned it, Kaler. You've earned the future you've built. The Exaltheri people had always been strong, but they had never known true strength until they learned the value of unity. With the humans by their side, they had discovered what it meant to rise together, to rebuild what was broken, and to forge a future without fear. Kaler turned to him, her eyes bright with determination. "We will never forget what you've done for us, Captain. But we are no longer the broken people you found when you first arrived. We are something new." Reynolds smiled, his heart full. "I don't think I could be prouder of you, Kaler. Your people are a shining example of what can be achieved when we work together." As the sun set behind the distant mountains, the two of them stood in silence, watching as the city below came alive with light. The future was still uncertain, but it was no longer something to fear. For the first time in a long time, the Excel theory had hope, a hope that extended beyond the stars, beyond the wounds of the past, and into a future they could shape for themselves. The Excel theory had found a new path, and the humans would always walk alongside them as friends, allies, and partners. Together, they had created a future where no one would be abandoned, and where the strength of unity would be their greatest weapon. And in that moment, with the stars beginning to twinkle above them, Kaler and Reynolds knew one thing: this was only the beginning.